This is honestly one of my favorite stories in history and one of the most misunderstood. Now, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say they're out here erasing and rewriting history. For as long as I've known, Cleopatra was Egyptian, and for as long as I've known, Egypt has been in Africa. But now, when you Google her name, they're calling her Macedonian Greek with Persian influence. And somehow, African ain't even part of the mix. Now, I'm not saying outsiders couldn't rule a kingdom, but come on, y'all. The facts are not facting. And if you just use a little common sense, her story tells you everything you need to know. Let's break it down. Cleopatra ruled Egypt, and Egypt is on the continent of Africa. Let's not make this harder than it is. Yes, her father came from a Greek family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, but by the time Cleopatra was born, they had been living and ruling in Africa for generations. And her mother? Now, see, that's the part folks don't want to talk about. We don't know who her mother was. There's no confirmed identity, no portrait, no clear ancestry. So, why do people automatically assume she wasn't an African? You notice how when the mother's identity is missing, people just fill in whiteness? Never mind that Cleopatra was born and raised in Africa. They can't prove she wasn't black, but they can act like they can. Keep it real. If her mama had blonde hair and blue eyes, we'd be looking at statues, paintings, and coins by now. But since her background is unclear, they just erased the possibility of Africa altogether. Also, being part Greek or Persian doesn't erase being African. Mixed people existed back then too. And y'all know how I say, if your mama or your daddy's black, you black. That's how the world sees us. Don't try to switch it up just because it's Cleopatra. And here's something else that really sets her apart. Cleopatra was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language. Let that sink in. Everybody before her ruled in Egypt without even speaking the language. But Cleopatra didn't just sit on a throne. She embraced the culture. She wore Egyptian clothing. She called herself the goddess Isis reborn. She connected with the people on the spiritual and cultural level. And look, I'm just saying, if she was the only one in her royal line to go that deep into the Egyptian culture, maybe that pride came from inside the house. Maybe her mama, who nobody wants to name, maybe she was Egyptian. Maybe she taught Cleopatra that language. I don't know, but y'all see where I'm going with this. Alright, so now let's talk about the juicy part. So y'all know my girl Cleopatra had two very powerful baby daddies, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. And they weren't just flings. These men came back to her, had kids with her, gave her land, power, influence. She wasn't just a side chick, she was the center. But let's not skip the part where neither of them married her. They had babies, they went back home to their wives in Rome, but they kept Cleopatra in Egypt, out of sight. Now let me ask you, when have you ever heard of a beautiful white royal woman being treated like that? Exactly, you haven't. Because that's not how white queens get treated. That's how black women have been treated. Loved in private, hidden in public. Y'all know we just did a video talking about those secret black families. So it looked like this has been going on, y'all. Now let's talk about the kids. With Caesar, Cleopatra had a son named Caesarion. And yes, she literally named him Little Caesar. That definitely sounds like something a black mama would do. Your daddy named Caesar? Bet. We naming you Caesarion. Then, with Mark Antony, she had three more children, some twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and her youngest son was Ptolemy Philadelphus. So no, this wasn't just casual. They built a whole family together. But again, neither one of them married her. Now let's talk about the end of Cleopatra's story. After losing the battle, Cleopatra and Mark Antony fled back to Egypt. Then came the rumor Cleopatra had died. Mark Antony was devastated. He tried to kill himself. They brought him to Cleopatra as he was dying, and he died in her arms. Y'all, that's love. That man couldn't live without her. But again, somebody that in love still didn't marry her? Come on now, y'all. That don't even make sense. This ain't rocket science. They loved her, but they couldn't bring her home. You know, like the old folks used to say, if they can't use your comb, then don't bring them home. Well, they must have got that from Rome. Bars. I'm just playing. But because bringing home a black African queen, yeah, that definitely wasn't going to fly in Rome. Now, this part was the final disrespect. After Antony died, Octavian planned to bring Cleopatra back to Rome. Now, Octavian is the one that was taken over, right? So he planned to bring Cleopatra back to Rome and parade her through the streets, not as a queen, as a trophy, as a spectacle, a defeated enemy. Now tell me, when have you ever seen a white queen treated like that? Dragged through the streets in front of a crowd? A parade of shame. You haven't, because that's not how white women are handled in history. But black women, we've seen it over and over again. Now I know somebody gonna say, but what about? Well, yeah, let's talk about the usual examples. Marie Antoinette, she had a trial. Sure, it wasn't fair, but it was still a trial. She wasn't paraded through the streets alive. She was buried with royal recognition. And Anne Boleyn, she was beheaded after fake charges. Her execution was semi-private, and she still got a noble burial. Nobody humiliated her kids or drags her name through the mud like Cleopatra. And there's Mary, Queen of the Scots. Long imprisonment, public trial, respected until the end. She was treated like a queen even as she died. Now let's look at Cleopatra, a queen ruling a kingdom, linked to not one but two Roman emperors, planned to be dragged through Rome like a circus act. No trial, no dignity. And her children? One was executed, the others were stolen and forgotten. Her legacy turned into a myth and whitewashed. But Cleopatra wasn't having none of that. She knew what was coming. The writing was already on the wall. And instead of giving them that satisfaction, she took control of her own ending. They say she died by a snake bite. Some say poison. Some say she used a sharp tool hidden in a comb. However it happened, it was on her terms. That's not weakness. That's power. So let's recap. Cleopatra ruled in Africa. Her mother's identity is unknown. She spoke the Egyptian language. She embraced the culture. She had kids with powerful men who couldn't claim her or wouldn't claim her. She was dragged, erased, rewritten. And now they want you to believe she was just a white woman in a crown? Make it make sense. We already know why they want to erase her blackness. We already know why they're rewriting this story. But we are not letting them. I want y'all to let me know. Have y'all ever heard of this? Like, did y'all know exactly what was going on with this Cleopatra story? Because I ain't gonna lie, it took me for a loop. I was like, my girl is full of drama. But anyway, back to the story. Remember, every time you like, comment, and share, you help keep this story alive. And we got to keep this one alive, y'all. They're not about to take our queen from us. And remember to subscribe for more stories that they don't put in your textbooks. We bringing back truth one story at a time. Peace.